Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Thanksgiving. It's Thursday, November 24th, 2022. Time for another turkey. I don't know. Trying to throw some sort of Thanksgiving twist into this. There's not much to say except, okay, thanks, everybody. So I guess that's it. We're done. Thanksgiving is over, although, I don't know, we could roll out a couple of individuals to thank. I am certain of it. As a matter of fact, as part of the Thanksgiving tradition, and I should just get back to that one day and just do entire Thanksgiving shows of thanking everybody who supports the show. There are some people who have not yet had their due, or who recently boosted the contributions that they give. So maybe they had their due when they were the first time they signed up to donate to support the show through Patreon and or what else can we support the show with? PayPal. And I guess it's time to maybe do a Venmo thing. Maybe we don't have a Venmo for the show. And we use the Cash app that also makes it possible. I think that one is among the more secure, by the way, if you've been holding out all this time, thinking that you want a more secure venue for handing over your hard-earned money. Although, PayPal, I think, has pretty much proven itself. They've had their data leaks, of course. Patreon, I don't think there have been any serious problems with Patreon. I think everything's been pretty secure, and I've heard nothing about it, so knock wood for that, if I can find any wood. I think I have wood veneer around. Knock that, then. And then the Cash App. But since the last call-outs, I suppose, the last one having been the famous Chris McElveen, who gave us the nice speech about having donated as a birthday present to himself. I like that very much. Sally, who already was a donor, has recently boosted her pledge, known online by the kooky crazy handle of Hamhock7023. So, just in case you were wondering, is the Sally they're talking about me? Yes. And then Andrew Schmidt, also already a donor, who agreed graciously to boost the donations he was making to support the show, and we thank you for it, and it helps put turkey on the table, quite literally today, because that's what's getting put on the table. That was all right. Well, at any rate, let's see. I say the holiday is done. I got a note already here on my Mastodon social that says, no, it ain't done until after the pie. A lot of people giving thanks for the pie today. That's a major factor and what's going on. By the way, the suggested resetting, reconfiguring of my Mastodon homepage to make it a little bit more like TweetDeck has mostly worked, although I haven't quite figured out how to follow the hashtags and give its own column yet. I'm sure it's quite simple, and I'm doing it, panicky and on the fly, and so if I can sit down and give it some time. So thanks to the suggestion there. Lots to catch up on today, and not certain how long we'll be here to do it. It's going to be a noisy day. The cooking is going to be going on in the background, and in about an hour, we'll mark the top of the hour with the ceremonial, except not ceremonial because it's actual, putting of the turkey into the oven. And for those of you who are strict vegetarians and vegans, that's your trigger warning. Don't show up to listen to that. I don't know. It's no worse, certainly, than Sarah Palin's clueless giving of the annual giving of the interview in front of the turkeys being slaughtered situation. But good news on that front. Sarah Palin won't be coming anywhere near Congress as a member anyway, anytime soon. She has lost. Mary Peltola declared the victor in the contest. That must have taken him some extra time to fly those ballots in from remote locations all over Alaska, and of course deal with their do they call it ranked choice voting as opposed to instant runoff voting, but pretty much the same thing, and doing all the calculations and trying to figure out who everybody's second choices were. Parasailing. Have we not noticed that before, that if you reverse that, she's parasailing? Anyway, Sarah Palin has lost. I guess convincingly enough that the pro-fish Mary Peltola returns to Congress. Congratulations to her. That's good news. That's a Democratic hold because she won the special election, and I'm sure Sarah Palin figured, no, if we just get to do it all over again, I'll totally win this time. And no, you don't. You actually lose. People don't like you. So at any rate, there's that news. Meanwhile, I guess we hinted at this yesterday that out in Arizona, things are starting to go crazy. Carrie Lake, I guess, I've seen a video of her circulating on the various social media sites. And I guess she's spending her time on television, continuing with her election denialism, her own election this time. Her own election that she lost. She denies that she lost, and she is issuing dire warnings to the current Republican governor of the state, Doug Ducey, and to the rival who defeated her, who I believe is currently Secretary of State in Arizona, Katie Hobbs, and warning them, don't sign that certification. If you know what's good for you, kind of thing. Right? Don't you dare sign that, or there's going to be, I don't remember exactly how she phrased the threats, and unfortunately the fastest way to probably find it is on the Bird site. And I could look around and see if I can get the quote for you. But she's kind of trending in that respect, I think, because she's out there looking to level her. Here we are. Ron Filipkowski has it. Carrie Lake is making threats today. When our main case drops, she says, they will hear it. Trust me. And they better think really hard before Ducey and Hobbs sign their John Hancock to that certification. They better think long and hard about what they know about this election. And, all right, sure, fine. Kind of a veiled threat. So what can you do? There are weirdos out there, and you got to look out for them. There are some really crazy folks out there. By the way, I guess speaking of Arizona, let me see if I can play this. I put aside, I've seen some crazy rants before, and this is one of them. Some crazy rants before about, how come my Pocket isn't opening on the big computer? Where is my saves? All right, let's see if we can open it up again. Or do I go to home? No. Where's my... this is not good. Why isn't this not coming up the way I want to? All right, well, at any rate, maybe I could play it on the laptop, and then you'll all be sorry. I don't know exactly what the... all right, get rid of the Pocket and try opening it again. I don't know. Oh, boy. Did that close like the Firefox, too? Oh, this is going to be a problem. All right, well, at any rate, some crazy rants, and there's this a guy, I guess he's well-known. He's not just like a local Arizona guy. It looks to me, I didn't look too deeply into it, but it looks like he's maybe a regular on InfoWars. That's the kind of level of crazy that we're talking about. And, well, I don't know why this isn't opening on, things are some very disturbing trends about things falling apart here on Twitter, but not on Twitter, but this time in Pocket. So let's see. I guess I saw. Yeah, his name is Matt Baker, and there we go. Finally, it caught up on the big computer. And Matt Baker, I don't know. I mean, he looks like a kind of a weird and dangerous kind of guy. White guy with dreadlocks, and that's always kind of a bit of a red flag. Anyway, Matt Baker went to yell at the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors and issue them some sort of ultimatum about the election tampering he's totally uncovered all the evidence of. And of course, A, no evidence, and B, nothing uncovered, and C, no one can understand anything he's talking about. This, I thought about playing this. It's about a minute and a half, and we'll break it up a little bit, maybe, so that, the powers that be that censor these things when they see intellectual property being, rules being violated. I don't know if this violates one or not. But, I mean, it is testimony at a public hearing. It ought to be very difficult to claim copyright, but then we are talking about having an InfoWars person being involved here. So we want to, not get involved to the extent that we can stay out of it. But, there's about a minute and a half of this rant, And it starts out pretty ranty, but he starts out calm. But then by the end, he's screaming and shouting, and it's quite astonishing. But more interesting than that to me, the reason I actually agreed to think about playing this thing is how disjointed it is. I mean, I know you know that they're crazy, but it's kind of jarring once in a while to see just how disjointed their thinking is. I mean, he's making steps. He thinks he's making this logical progression, but because none of us speak the lunatic code that he's steeped in, we can't follow along. So he makes these leaps. Well, let's roll it and see.
Once again, the eyes of the world are upon Maricopa County.
Oh dear.
For another botched election. Am I here to accuse you of stealing the vote? Heavens no, for that would make me a terrorist, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
Let me ask you, if you took your life savings to a bank and the teller put them in a machine and the machine kicked out 1 out of 4 of your bills and the teller said, don't worry, we'll put them in box 3 over here.
All right, I got to pause it at this point. First of all, a lot of stuff has already happened, and it's kind of crazy as it is. But, one, he's not here to question the election because that would make him a terrorist, because there was that thing a while ago, but it was actually about the parents speaking up at the thing, and they were supposedly saying that Merrick Garland said they were terrorists for speaking up at parents' meetings, and they weren't. They were terrorists for threatening all of the people on the school board that we're going to kill you when you leave, and we know where you live. That's kind of what makes you a terrorist. But anyway, then he goes on to say, all right, so he gives the example. What if you went to a bank and you put your life savings in a bank and they put all your money in a machine and it kicked out every 4th bill and they said, don't worry, we're going to put it in box 3. There's the first sign that we're talking in code here. You remember when Greg told us about box 3 being a big thing among these election conspiracy theorists in Arizona and in Maricopa County in particular. So I think we got the germ of truth behind all of that. Turned out to be, and this helps clear up, right? We had that puzzlement over, well, they had some printer problems. And so therefore it caused a delay in tabulating the results. And I was like, how does a printer problem create problems in tabulating results? That doesn't make any sense. Well, it can make sense. And as it turns out, the explanation, if it's really even true, and I don't know, but I mean, okay, this sounded like a decent explanation. If you're printing ballots for people, and I mean, I don't know what the problem would be, but it's coming out too light. Now, Greg mentioned that it was the printer settings were too light. I don't know. Back in the old days, if you were like low on toner or ink or whatever, I don't know. Maybe that doesn't happen anymore. I don't know. I try not to print things. And the printers I have just, they have the good old-fashioned ink stuff. If you're low on ink, okay. So it prints too lightly. Now, it's the sort of thing you would probably stop for and refill the ink. But something else was going on. And I guess they couldn't get it to print right. And so it wasn't printing dark enough. Now, if you are printing out ballots and it's pretty light, but it's dark enough for people to read and fill in the votes, but then when you feed it into the vote scanning machine that counts the votes for you, at least preliminarily, I could see where that machine might have trouble. If it's not this dark, I can't read it. Now, humans can read it, but the machine can't. So that's an issue. All right. So apparently they dealt with that by saying, oh, well, when those ballots come out or they get kicked back out by the machine because it can't read them, we'll put them in this box. And I guess they had a box 1 and there was also a box 2 somewhere. But box 3 is the notorious box among the conspiracy theorists. And I guess you put them in box 3 and then they say, okay, I can read it. You can read it. The machine can't read it. Not every ballot is like that. We're working on fixing the printer that is putting out these ballots, and we're going to stop using it. So that could cause some delays. True. But in the meantime, these ballots are readable by the human eye, but not the machines. We'll put them in another box, and then we'll count them later by hand, presumably, because they're human readable, but not machine readable. And we'll just keep them separate because all the rest of the ballots have been counted. I mean, actually quite rational reaction. But in conspiracy land, box 3. So remember, now here's the rant. He says, what if this was your life savings and you went to a bank and you gave them all your life savings? I mean, it's so far not yet a terrible analogy. You give them all the money and every fourth bill gets kicked out because the machine doesn't like it. Now, of course, that wouldn't happen with currency because they print them all pretty much the same and they don't put them in circulation. But okay, for the sake of argument, what if every fourth bill was kicked out? Well, what if your life savings was totally liquid and in cash? Sure. And then every fourth bill gets kicked out. And he says, and they put it in box 3, and they say, don't worry, because we're going to put box 3 in this other location, and we'll count it later. Wouldn't that be terrible? And I don't know that it would be terrible. I mean, banks count money all the time, and sometimes they don't count it right in front of you, and I don't know. But okay, let's listen to what he has to say. It's mostly about the disjointedness and the gigantic leaps that he's making. And he's sure everybody's following along. Just like they're all wearing their hair in dreadlocks like he is. They're hanging on every word.
And we'll let you know how many were in there later.
All right, so that was the, right. All your life savings gets run through the machine. Every fourth bill is kicked out. They put it in box 3, and they say, we'll let you know how much is in there later, which is kind of what they would do. If you showed up with a wad of cash, and they put it through the counting machine, you know, or like, I don't know that counting machines do this, but have you not been to a vending machine and tried to put in $1 and it says, I don't like this dollar? I mean, is that vote fraud? Is it we all have to have a revolution now because the Coke machine didn't like my dollar bill? You know, you flatten it out, you try it again. And if you don't, if it doesn't take it, you just take your dollar and you leave. But if you took it to a bank, I mean, you take your dollar and leave because Coke machines aren't banks. Right? Well, they're not getting credit for that dollar, but you can take it somewhere else and get credit for that dollar. But the bank, they're keeping it. Well, that's because it's a depository institution. Yes, they're keeping it and they'll count it and then put it in your account. But I mean, how do you know anything about a bank? You go there with $1,000 and you show up and they give you a receipt that says $1,000 on it that it was deposited and you walk away. How do you know they're not just going to steal that money? You don't. I mean, we have a federal deposit insurance, et cetera. But I mean, other than that, well, how do you know anything? I mean, you just gotta say, I have a receipt. Like what, if you vote in paper ballots and it's hand counted, how do you know they're counting your vote? You know, they say that that's the obvious answer. Well, because it's on paper and you can see it. You can't see it. You're not there. Monitors are there on our behalf and they can see that it's been counted. They can't tell it's your ballot. But they're watching to see that the whole process is on the up and up. Yeah, and people are watching now to see this whole process is on the up and up. But they're not me. This is what it comes down to. Anyway, so again, this story. I'll back it up a little bit and let him wind up his story.
Here, and we'll let you know how many were in there.
Here,
the teller said, don't worry, we'll put them in box 3 over here.
Box 3.
And we'll let you know how many were in there later. We'll send them off to a separate location, and someone will be sure to get back to you and tell you how much money you have. Would you be okay with that?
Yes, I would.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I would not be okay
with that.
No, I would not be okay with that. How would I not be okay with that? Because Dreadlock Guy, King of Finance, tells me I'm not to be okay with it. I would not be okay with it. We'll tell you how much money you have. That's how a bank works, really, honestly. I mean, maybe he doesn't trust banks. That's possible. But he left that step out, right? If they took your money and they said, we'll put it and we'll count it later somewhere else and we'll let you know how much is in there. I mean, usually you don't show up with, you know, so much cash that they can't count it all and tell you how much is in there. But I don't know. Some people come in with coins, right? And if you don't want to stand there and pour them all into Coinstar, they'll count them and tell you how much you had. Or if you bring a giant wad of cash, they'll count it and tell you how much. Usually it's enough. Or, you know, it's not so much that they can't count it right there and tell you, but otherwise they might very well tell you that. Or I bought stocks and today I sell, you know, my Tesla stocks. You probably should. And they tell you, you know, do you know how much money you have right away? No, you probably don't. I mean, maybe with online brokerage, you get some sense of that now, but otherwise, you know, with the standard brokerage, we'll put the order in, you know, you say you want to sell it at, 15 cents a share, which is probably where it is now. But the broker won't tell you on the phone, yeah, that's what you're going to get. They'll say, hey, we're going to sell it and we'll tell you how much money you have later. That is how it works. But I guess, we're not supposed to be happy with that. But I don't know. So, okay, he decided that we're not supposed to be happy with it. We would not be okay with that. And then, after that, linkage goes out the window.
Now ask yourself the question, which is more valuable, your vote or your money?
That is a whopper, isn't it? That's like, I don't know if this is a weed guy, but he kind of looks like maybe he might be something of a weed guy. And, I don't know. It doesn't sound like he's high right now or anything, but, well, the logic does. So now ask yourself, what's more important, your vote or your money? And the reason we're asking that question is because we started off talking about votes, and then we started talking about an analogy that had money in it. So, there you go. Which is more important, your vote or your money? I don't understand. But I mean, I guess that's a fair question to ask. It doesn't follow from the fact that you were once talking about votes and then talking about money. But all right. I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on how you look at things. Like when I'm hungry, my money is more important. The fact that I would have the freedom to go out and buy food or whatever kind of food or, a stable currency system, starts to make me think maybe my vote's most important first. I don't know, bit of a chicken and an egg problem, but, not sure where you're going with it. Not sure why I have to ask which is more important, my money or my vote. I wasn't asked for my money at the polling station. No amount of money would have printed the ink better. Box 3 was going to be box 3 no matter what. I don't really get it. But then, all right. So he goes on. He's now posed the ultimate question. What's more important, your money or your vote? But it gets better. It's important that we ask other people this question too, apparently.
Now ask a lobbyist that same question. Now ask a campaign manager that question.
He's escalating now, and I hate to interrupt his flow, but ask a lobbyist that question. What question? Whether it's what they value more, their money or their vote, or whether I value my money or my vote more, and the lobbyist is going to comment on my preferences. I'm not sure what he's saying. But what's more important to you, your money or your vote? Now ask a lobbyist that same question. Now ask, I love the now ask thing. Well, I'm not going to ask anybody any of these questions. Shut up. You're an idiot and I don't have to listen to you, but you have to because I'm playing you this tape. But I mean, I guess a lobbyist is a bad guy. So we're going to ask that question and obviously his answer is going to be nefarious. And I assume, by the way, I guess in his mind, a lobbyist would think money is more important because he can buy votes with the money. I don't know. Now ask a campaign manager that question. What exactly?
Now ask Mark Zuckerberg that question, which is more valuable,
Ooh, Mark
your
Zuckerberg.
money
He's also
or
bad.
your vote or your country or this world?
He's added more. So what's more important? Your vote, your money or your vote or your country or the world? Wow. That's changing the question as we go. I feel like you're moving the goalposts here. But he's yelling, so it's obviously a more salient point now.
Or the corruption that is taking over every single county in this nation. And then you look into your own soul and you look back at yourself in the mirror and realize that you are the cancer that is tearing this nation apart. Good day.
Good day. I like that he ends with, and it is a good day. How do you like that crescendo? And that's supposed to be like that guy just destroyed the Maricopa County something board. And, that's what passes for discourse on that side. Now, granted, he's an InfoWars idiot, but I don't know. I felt like you should see these guys are outraged every time and they scream and they come in. But can you distill anything from that? I understand that they're upset about box 3 and that they didn't count the votes on site there somewhere. But these are potentially spoiled ballots, I guess, that might be saved by being reviewed by human eyes. But that's a sensitive process and you don't just do it at every polling station. You send those to a centralized counting location where people who have had some training about what is the procedure that you go through to try and cure these ballots are going to be able to lay eyes on them, not just whoever brought the donuts to this polling station at the middle school in Maricopa, but somebody with some training and with some observers watching to make sure they're applying the training correctly. That's what he's screaming about, is that they actually were following procedure and bringing it to a place where the count would be done in monitored setting, and there would be some accountability for the determinations being made. The elections judge would be there. There would be a Democrat and a Republican, and both would have to agree that the ballot said what they think it said in order for it to be counted and go forward. But ask yourself, no, ask a lobbyist, no, ask Mark Zuckerberg. What is more important to you? Your money or your vote or this country or the world? And you are the cancer and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I just found it kind of astonishing. And so today, of all days, isn't it time now that you should be thankful that you don't have Thanksgiving with this guy? And that, what's his name? Matt Baker is not the crazy uncle in your family. You don't have to listen to him at your table. And if you do, or you have the rough equivalent of someone like Matt Baker at your table, I wish you peace today. Good luck with everything. But anyway, in the meantime, if you don't have that, there's something you can be thankful for. If you're searching around and you're looking for something out of the ordinary to be thankful for, you can be thankful that you don't have white dreadlock Uncle Matt Baker at your Thanksgiving table asking you whether you have valued your turkey more than the stuffing or this world or this universe, or whatever it might be. I don't think I can carry that crescendo all the way through to the end of this thing. Okay, well, we'll be right back. We'll take a break. So far, so good here. I'm feeling good. Are we going to do the full 2 hours? It's a big mystery. Stay tuned to find out. No, you didn't know that was in the offing, did you? Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. It just occurred to me I need to work on setting up something with Mastodon so that we tweet out the Kagro in the Morning live notice to everyone the way we do. Although I don't know, I usually end up not tweeting it out anymore over the Bird site. Not because I just recently decided to abandon it, but because it was something I just never did in show prep, and I really I should be utilizing Mastodon better for things like that, and just trying to make the transition over there. Libsyn has not yet offered us the option to publish notice when our podcast is complete and published. You can automatically tweet something out, but they don't have anything up for Mastodon yet. And I wonder whether they're working on that, or maybe they're just waiting to see which social media site we do, in fact, eventually settle on, and whether Mastodon is really going to be it before they do it. So maybe I could do that manually from here on at this point. Anyway, I just thought that was quite an interesting rant, and there were a lot of interesting video clips circulating in the last couple of days. Some very disappointing in terms of humanity and how we feel about them. For instance, let's see, I don't think I put these aside, but some typically disappointing to greater than usual disappointment from the usual quarters, I suppose, on the Club Q shooting. First, there was circulating. I'll have to dig these things up so that I can share them with you. But I happened to see, and perhaps you also saw, I'll have to look through the search. What's her name? Now I already forget her name. The Jenna Ellis, is it? The woman, was she the parking garage attorney, or I can't remember, but over in the Trump administration, I forget her background now. I think she might have been the parking. Well, I can't remember whether she's a parking lot attorney or whether she was a traffic court. That's it. Parking lot was Alina Baba, was that right? Who was the parking garage attorney? She was the traffic court turned counsel to the president attorney. So Jenna Ellis on the Club Q shooting, a clip widely circulated by the Twitter account of Andrew Kimmel. Who's Andrew? TV producer, live streamer of news, co-founder of Aura Nexus, if that tells you anything. Former head of live video at BuzzFeed News, which I guess brings us to how it is that he's circulating this clip. And I guess she's got her own podcast show. She does this thing on video. Basically, I could be doing what she's doing. And she's like in a room in her house. It's fairly obvious. She's not got a normal set or anything, but she's got the little bug in the corner and everything, the little video bug, the Jenna Ellis show. Anyway, she dedicates how long? 38. Well, there's a 38-second clip of her show, which is adequately summed up by Andrew's partial transcription here, saying that on the Club Q shooting, should we play what she has to say? I mean, she is kind of a jerk ass, but maybe you really have to hear it for yourself in her own dumb voice, possibly, to fully appreciate it. All right, let's see. We'll put it in pocket. We'll engineer the same thing. Oh, that reminds me. I guess it's a good thing that I'm doing it this way so I can remind myself afterwards. I will forget. And we'll remember on Monday when Greg calls that I turned up the volume on Firefox and that the Skype volume, I think, goes through the same box, virtual box 3. And he'll come through booming like a giant. But I needed to boost the audio so you could hear these crazy people rant. Where is Jenna Ellis? So 38 seconds of really super disappointing humanity in this piece, discussing the shooting and just where she is. And I guess that there's not universal condemnation of this is troubling, and just generally revealing of that we're in a bad place and we are in some serious danger in this country of permitting any number of genocides by the radical right wing here. This is how she describes what I guess is going on, what passes for Jenna Ellis's mind about the Club Q shooting.
The 5 people who were killed in the nightclub that night, there is no evidence at all that they were Christians. And so here. Assuming right. that they were not, that they had not accepted the truth of the gospel of Christ and affirmed Jesus Christ as the Lord of their life, they are now reaping the consequences of having eternal damnation. And that is far, far greater. And we should be having that conversation instead of just the tragedy of what happened to the body. We need to be talking about what happened to the soul and the fact that they are now in eternal separation from our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. The 5 people who were killed. That is
rather troubling, isn't it? And I don't know whether she thought, I don't know whether she meant to go this way and then thought she had to save it or not. It was essentially, at first, my first take on this, right? The 5 people who were killed in there. Well, we don't know that there's no evidence that they were Christian. So I guess we don't have to care. But she doesn't quite take that tack. She's not unconcerned with them. It's just that she's concerned that their souls can't go to heaven because they're not Christian enough for her, I guess. And that's an interesting take, as opposed to the straight up, it's okay to kill them because they're gay. This is an interesting tack on that, right? I think I will be universally condemned if I say it's okay to kill them because they're gay. But if I say it's okay, not that it's okay to kill them, but that we should really, the real concern is not so much that they're they've been murdered. It's that their souls are going to be in peril because they're not Christian enough for us, which, ultimately, I guess that could be taken as what she'll say, I'm sure, is, I'm so Christian and such a good person, I worry about the eternal fate of their souls. That they got murdered. What can you do? It's their time. God says so. God wills it. Now the only question is what to do with their souls. And quite frankly, I'm deeply moved by the fact that we don't know that these people are going to be able to be saved because they're not just like me. It's another way of saying the same thing. It's okay to kill gay people. And that's kind of troubling that this is something that you would say out loud and videotape and then try and disseminate into the world. I don't think that there's anybody watching, but, it's troubling enough that you're trying, quite honestly. So that was an interesting one. And then, I don't know whether I can find this one. And this one I don't think I can play for you, or maybe if I find it, I can play it for you because, you got to hear the guy's voice, which is to say that you aren't going to be able to understand what he's saying because he's unintelligible. But there are, let's see, a couple of versions of this video circulating. I'll try and find a decent one here. But I'll play you a sample of the guy's voice so that you can hear it. This is rather incredible, too. It is the Club Q shooter's father agreeing, I guess, to give an interview to the local CBS affiliate, News 8, and they capture a solid minute of his ramblings. And you'll hear the voice quality, like I said, not particularly good. And I think it's probably better if I just read you the transcript of what he says after you get some idea of the voice. But here too, I don't know. I'm not good with the trigger warnings, but, hey, warning. I should have given it to you before Jenna Ellis. All right, let me roll this guy's voice just so you can hear what's going on.
There was a shooting involving, multiple people.
Right.
And then later on gone to find it's a gay bar.
Yeah, right. And
I was like, oh my God, it's a gay.
Yeah, so here you go. It's pretty crazy. So it's difficult to hear. The audio quality is not great either. They're out on the street, and mostly you hear the engine hums of passing traffic, and then this guy's mumbly, low register voice. Well, anyway, if you couldn't tell what he was saying, it looks like the transcription here reads that he heard that there was a shooting, and then they're telling me about an incident, a shooting, and then I go on to find, and P.S., there's an incident, there's a shooting. Your son is the shooter. There's a mass shooting at a location, and your son did it. And he's, I guess, initially in shock, maybe disbelief, maybe not, I don't know. And there's indication that maybe he wouldn't be in disbelief. But at any rate, he goes on to say, well, then they started telling me about the incident, and then I go on to find out it's a gay bar. I got scared. Crap, we'll say. Is he gay? His first concern was, so your son just murdered a bunch of people. Yeah, in a gay bar. What? Is he gay? He's a murderer. I mean, did that not register with you? Yeah, but is he a gay murderer? And by that, I mean not a murderer of gays, but is he gay? Well, I don't know, but he just murdered a bunch of people. And I guess he does a quick calculation. So, well, he was probably murdering gay people because he's not gay, which, by the way, I don't know anything about the guy, but I do remember that, fairly frequently when this kind of stuff happens, it turns out that if you plunge into the background and you're doing an investigation, you might find sometimes when people lash out like that at gay people, sometimes, not always, certainly not always, but sometimes you find out that they're lashing out because they're struggling with how they feel about the fact that, A, there are gay people in the world, or sometimes it's about the fact that they fear that they might be gay, themselves, and they've been taught that that is wrong, and they're not going to kill themselves. Maybe they can just kill all the gay people in the world, and then there won't be anybody to have a sexual relationship with, and then he won't act on it. I mean, there are such crazy people, and sometimes they're motivated by that. There's also just straight, pure, crazy hatred. Absolutely. And I can't tell you which one it is, because Dad here has apparently got at least the straight crazy hatred, and he may also have the other part too. I don't know, but this is what he first consoles himself with. At least he's not gay. Phew. He's like breathing a sigh of relief. There's no sigh of relief. He's a mass murderer. Well, not for this guy, who then goes on to say that he is apparently a Mormon and a conservative Republican. And, I mean, I don't know what to tell you about that. There's no saving that. I wanted you to know what you already knew, or I wanted to acknowledge what you already knew, and I wasn't acknowledging that there are some very, very dangerous people out there, and they are giving equally dangerous people without a thought of their own in their heads some very dangerous thoughts to run with. And probably, I don't know, I wonder whether maybe the news ethics people can tell us whether it was a mistake to run that interview or not. I don't know. Anyway, there's some bad stuff happening out there. Do try and avoid it. And I hope you can. And if you do, for every day that you successfully avoid it, you should be giving thanks. Every day is a Thanksgiving. If you can avoid dealing with these guys. And by dealing with them, I mean being shot by them or having to hear about who else they shot. All right. I need to switch gears for this. And it's becoming quickly apparent that, one, it's not quite as noisy as I thought it would be in the background, and that's good. And two, there's much more to share. And there was some question about whether or not I would just simply do an hour or so to keep you company this morning, but this is too depressing an hour. And you need something else, perhaps. And there's lots more news, of course. And things are going fairly smoothly, so maybe we just plow straight on forward. Let's see. First of all, I will read you this story from the New York Times, a little bit of an update on the continuing updates of the no good, terrible, very bad days, or whatever the order is, for the former guy in court, that place where he doesn't control the narrative. Prosecution rests as Trump company trial moves faster than expected, says the New York Times, specifically say Jonah Bromwich, Lola Fadulu, and William K. Roshbaum. I always feel like if you take the trouble of putting the middle initial in there, I should read it, and I missed it on Jonah. Jonah E. Bromwich. I don't know, maybe it's too much. Jonah Bromwich would do just fine, I think, if you were being interviewed on television. Subheader tells us that in a sign of confidence, the Manhattan prosecutors skipped a witness that they had said they would call. The case could end as soon as next week. I don't, question their tactics or anything, although I do lament not having more testimony on the record, because you never know what kind of fun nuggets you can unearth. And the more you know about Trump and Trump world, the better, generally. But they have a very discreet goal here in winning this case, and if it helps them win the case, that's what they're going to do. Manhattan prosecutors rested their case in the tax fraud trial of Donald J. Trump's, family business on Monday without calling a witness they had previously planned to question, an indication of confidence after the company's longtime CFO testified last week. The former CFO, Alan H. Weisselberg, I'm going to skip the middle initials after all, I changed my mind on that, strengthened the prosecution's hand as he admitted to his participation in a tax scheme with the company, the Trump Organization, in case you didn't know, is also charged. Weisselberg pleaded guilty in his role in the scheme this summer, also said on cross-examination that he had not conspired with any Trump relative and had acted solely for himself, which may have helped the defense. But prosecutors appeared satisfied with his testimony, deciding not to call the other crucial witness, Donald Bender, who for years was an outside accountant for Mr. Trump and the company. So that is interesting. Weisselberg at the last minute, I guess, decides to sort of kind of fall on his sword. I mean, he's already pled guilty, but to tell the court, I did it all by myself. The Trumps never knew. They never asked me. I did it all for myself. And, there's plenty of testimony already that nothing ever happened in the Trump Organization without Trump knowing about it and having his fingerprints on it. Anyway, so they didn't call this Donald Bender guy. Instead, Mr. Bender, who works for the accounting firm Mazars USA, was called as a defense witness, taking the stand Monday afternoon. Mr. Bender has been cooperating with prosecutors since at least last year. Last week, they said in court that they expected to call him, but they reversed that plan. The Trump Organization lawyers have sought to suggest that Mr. Bender bore responsibility for not alerting executives, including Mr. Weisselberg and Jeffrey McConney, the company's controller, that the tax scheme was illegal. Oh no, how could they ever found that out? Prosecutors, on the other hand, have presented evidence that indicated that Mr. Bender would not have been responsible for inaccuracies in the company's tax reporting. The prosecutor's conclusion of their case suggested that the trial, which some experts had expected to last well into December, could conclude as soon as next week, with the defense hoping that Mr. Bender's testimony might help tip the scales in their favor as the jury prepares to deliberate. After Tuesday, proceedings will pause for the Thanksgiving holiday. I guess that was a couple of days ago, resuming November 28th. The trial concerns, in case you didn't know, a scheme which Mr. Weisselberg and other Trump Organization executives, in which they received some compensation in off-the-books perks, including apartment rentals, leased luxury cars, private school tuition, etc. for their relatives. The company has been charged with 17 counts of tax fraud, conspiracy, scheme to defraud, and falsification of business records. To prove the company guilty, prosecutors must show that Mr. Weisselberg, who lost his title this year but is still being paid, engaged in the scheme in behalf of the company. I would always say on behalf of, but okay. To do so, they asked him questions that prompted him to testify that the company had benefited because the scheme allowed it to avoid paying its executives and authorities more money. Tax authorities, right? Okay. But Mr. Weisselberg's testimony, which was required by his plea deal, was not wholly positive for the prosecutors. Under questioning from a company lawyer, Alan Futterfuss, remember him? He said repeatedly that he'd act solely for his own benefit, playing into their argument that, as the team has repeatedly put it, Weisselberg did it for Weisselberg. It's a thought, but everybody kind of knows the Trump reputation these days. According to the judge presiding over the case, Juan Merchan, the prosecutors must show that Weisselberg acted for the interests other than his own, that he sought to benefit the company, whether he was successful in doing so or not. Depending on how Justice Merchan, Justice, is it? Do they refer to him that way in New York? Explains that concept to the jury and how carefully jurors parse his directions, one or more of them might conclude that Weisselberg acted only for himself, leading to an acquittal or a hung jury. Defense lawyers have sought to emphasize that Mazars USA bore responsibility for not alerting the Trump Organization to the illegality of their scheme. But they have lawyers for that. They appear to believe that some jurors may be convinced that the Trump Organization was not culpable and that the responsibility lay solely with Mr. Weisselberg, Mr. McConney, the controller, who is immune from prosecution after having testified in the grand jury, and Mr. Bender. Yes, all the things that the Trump Organization did are really the fault of a guy named Weisselberg, one named McConney, and one named Bender. On Monday, they questioned Mr. Bender about his relationship with the Trump Organization. Trump and his employees, including Weisselberg and the company controller McConney. Bender testified to a relatively close relationship with the company, by far his biggest client, saying that he had attended Trump's wedding and the wedding of Mr. Weisselberg's son. They were close enough that Bender was comfortable blowing off steam with a spirited email exchange that included Mr. Weisselberg. It was triggered when Bender sent a blank email with the subject heading, "Alan causing me grief." When Weisselberg responded, saying that his questions about the company bills were nothing personal, just business, Bender fired back in all caps, "I know it is not personal, but I am the best investment you have." Wow, that's nice thinking about yourself. The defense asked Bender to testify about a document that showed him calculating two different scenarios that would determine how much money Weisselberg made and the amount of taxes he paid. One factored in a portion of the scheme in which the executives reported a part of their compensation as if they were independent contractors. In that scenario, Weisselberg took home more money and paid less in taxes. The document seemed to suggest that Bender was aware of that portion of the scheme. On Friday, Weisselberg had testified that Bender had never told him he was committing a crime by filing his tax returns without declaring the perks he had received. He said that if he had been told certain practices were illegal, he would not have engaged in them. But Weisselberg has also testified that under terms of the company's arrangement with Mazars, it was his responsibility to verify the accuracy and completeness of the Trump Organization's accounting practices, not that of the outside firm. In February, Mazars cut ties with Trump and his company and said it could no longer stand behind a decade's worth of financial statements it had prepared for the Trump Organization. You knew that already. Just thought I would throw that in there because it's there in print, and I didn't know what I was reading until I got there. All right. Let's see. Other stories about which you should be aware. Also in the legal arena. Also from the New York Times, this time the reporting / fault of Maggie Haberman and Michael Schmidt. Haberman in the doghouse again, of course, in the last couple of days. I'm sure you've seen that she is all in on Wedding Gate, I guess, right? The story we haven't even mentioned, I don't think. But, or maybe we did. Anyway, apparently the point of that story, in case you've missed it so far, that a Biden granddaughter had her wedding at the White House. And apparently also, by the way, with she and her fiance living at the White House for some couple of months. I guess they were between apartments or whatever. That's always a little bit weird. And but Republicans are really going crazy about that. They lived there. They were mooching off the people. But remember that Melania's parents lived at the White House for a little while. And, they had been sort of around in the world for quite a while and really probably should have been expected to live on their own and pay their own way. But, these things happen among families. It's not a big deal. But the wedding gate, of course, the granddaughter had her wedding, and it was closed to the press, and apparently that was bothersome to the press. But then they were really perturbed because Vanity Fair, apparently, which is a member of the press, was allowed to take pictures. They did a whole wedding spread on the occasion, but they apparently photographed all this stuff ahead of time, like a day or two before the wedding. But they staged everything. It got in the dress and whatever. And so it looked like they covered the wedding. And all the journalists were mad because, hey, we didn't get to cover the wedding. You said it was closed to the press, but Vanity Fair got in. What's the story? And the press office said, well, they weren't there. They didn't go to the wedding. They took pictures that were staged ahead of time, like people might do for the New York Times wedding announcements, etc., stuff like that. And why didn't you tell us that they were doing it? Well, you asked, can you go to the wedding? And the answer was no, because it's closed to the press. And they didn't go, so it still was closed to the press. And so now they're fighting over whether that was too cute by half to say, no, it was closed to the press. But there was one outlet that got an exclusive opportunity to take pictures of them, not on the wedding day, but that looked like it was on the wedding day. And I guess the thinking here is, well, the Bidens didn't want to discuss it because it's Vanity Fair, and it has the word vanity right in the title, and isn't this, elitism kind of something, yada, yada, gargle, bargle. But anyway, so they're fighting about this stuff, and Maggie Haberman is covering it. And when people say, don't you have something important to do? She says, well, you got to cover the little lies because they could give way to big lies later. Now, I assume that she meant big lies about something else. Like, not there's going to be a bigger revelation about the wedding, because that is no revelation about the wedding that could be of any importance, really. That would be a big lie. But it was also very interesting that she very quickly was able to adopt the word lie. She covered the little lies, because they could lead to bigger lies. And she, studiously avoided using the L word during the entirety of the Trump administration. So yes, everybody justifiably mad at her and tweeting around, both her tweet in which she said, we got to cover the little lies in case there's some big lies coming down the pike, and her several tweets in the past about saying, we don't say the word lie. That's not our job. Our job is to report the facts and let you make that conclusion when it was about Trump, which is pretty revealing. That's actually a fairly significant and serious error on her part. Anyway, we'll read her reporting anyway about a different subject because it's out there and you need to know about it. Justice Department seeking to question Pence in its January 6th investigation. That seems very important. Prosecutors want to speak with the former vice president as a witness to former President Donald Trump's efforts to remain in power, and said he has said to be considering how to respond. So I at least want to set that storyline up in your mind, even if Maggie Haberman is involved in the reporting of it. I'll jump down because the introductory paragraph tells you that, which the headline has already revealed. Pence, according to people familiar with his thinking, is open to considering the request, recognizing that DOJ's criminal investigation is different from the inquiry by the House committee, whose overtures he has flatly rejected. Complicating the situation is whether Trump would try to invoke executive privilege to stop him, he will try, certainly, or limit his testimony, a step that he has taken with limited success so far with other former officials. I would say virtually no success, really. Pence was present for some of the critical moments in which Trump and his allies schemed to keep him in office and block the congressional certification of Joseph R. Biden Jr.'s victory. An agreement for him to cooperate would be the latest remarkable twist in an investigation that's already fraught with legal and political consequences, involving a former president who is now a declared candidate to return to the White House and whose potential rivals for the 2024 Republican nomination include Mr. Pence. That is, I would agree, something of a twist. Okay. It's probably time now for me to decide whether we go on with this and read about a couple other stories. I think we should do at least one more segment, and I have the assurance of justice that this will be okay and we can engineer our way around almost anything. So let's take the 1 minute break and come on back. Oops, I'm already late for it as I was adjusting the volume on things. And we'll read you the rest of this article. I've got one or two other things of interest, I think, about the bird site, which may or may not survive the rest of the holiday week and weekend. And then perhaps we can wind things up, or maybe there's another long read or two that we can share. Almost time to put the turkey in, too. All right, we'll be back in just 1 minute, and maybe some clattering when we get back. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. When does the parade start? Did the parade start at 9, or does it start at 10, or, say, 11? 12? I don't even know. I'm not certain. All I know is we'll be off the air before the Alice's Restaurant performances at, I think at noon, wherever you may be, on various radio stations. That's sort of a Thanksgiving tradition. As is our being unclear on our game plan going into each day. All right, I think we're just doing everybody a favor, I guess, by going on with the show. We're doing Justice, I think, a favor. He has some programming all queued up and ready to go in case we cut out. And we could still cut out after 3 segments. I warn you. But I don't want to keep him sitting by the... he said, this is something... By the way, the dedication. You think this is dedication? Me doing a show? I just do what I normally do every day. But Justice basically said, yeah, you can do what you want. I'll be monitoring what's going on. And if you cut out, we'll put something on that'll bridge the gap between your show, short or otherwise, and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, which I'll be working on at the time anyway. I'll be at my desk, basically, so I can listen in and figure out what's going on. And I thought, that's pretty extraordinary. You're going to be up at, remember, this is like 5 a.m. his time when we start this show. So, okay, 6 a.m. when we make our decision about whether to go on at the 10 o'clock hour. But when are you doing it? You should be sleeping. But I guess he's an early riser. God help us dealing with those early risers. But thank God we've got him, because otherwise, how would we run this place? So thanks, Justice. It's a Thanksgiving. Thanks to Justice. When you're done giving thanks for your turkey, you can thank whoever you think is appropriate to thank for the presence of Justice Putnam. And hey, why not head on over to Netroots Radio? Are we .org these days? You can show them your appreciation. You can, of course, donate to support this show. Absolutely. We encourage you to do so. Pretty much every day we annoy you with the same announcement about that. But every once in a while, we remember that it would be wise for you to head over to netrootsradio.com. They're using the .com. And there's a donate button there. Keep them in business, because we couldn't do it without them. I mean, I guess we could. We would just record this thing in our basement and then put out lousy audio. But without them, no such thing as the streaming live on a powerful and beautiful and professional sounding channel, I think. Well, instead we would be doing YouTubes from the basement like Jenna Ellis, which, I don't know, I guess it's working for her. But the point is, Justice is a good guy, and he makes all this possible. And Netroots Radio ain't free to run either. You get the idea? Okay. So, should we tell you more about Mike Pence and what he's up to, even though Maggie Haberman is involved in the reporting? Sure. Why not? You need to know the background here. So, the big twist here, one, Trump could try to invoke executive privilege, but will he, given that one, none of that has ever worked, that doesn't matter to him. And two, that Pence might run against him for the Republican nomination in 2024. I don't think that would affect his choice of whether or not to protect himself, but you never know. It's just an interesting twist. Thomas Windom, spelling, if you're looking him up, Windom, not Ham. But Thomas Windom, one of the lead investigators examining the efforts to overturn the election, reached out to Mr. Pence's team in the weeks before Attorney General Merrick B. Garland appointed a special counsel on Friday to oversee the January 6th investigation and a separate inquiry into Trump's handling of classified documents, according to one of the people familiar with the matter. Of course. Who else would tell you that? Mr. Garland has said that the appointment of the special counsel, Jack Smith, fake name, will not slow the investigation. Officials at the Justice Department declined to comment. A spokesman for Mr. Pence also declined to comment. That's, de rigueur for the newspaper folks. They have to say that. The discussions about questioning Mr. Pence are said to be in their early stages. Pence has not been subpoenaed, and the process could take months because Trump can seek to block or slow his testimony by trying to invoke executive privilege. It might not work, but it will slow things down for sure. Trump has cited executive privilege to try to stop other former top officials from talking with investigators. While those efforts have generally been unsuccessful in stopping testimony by the officials to a grand jury, they have significantly slowed the process. And that's all they're really looking for here. Some way to slow it down so that Trump dies in the interim, really. Trump's efforts to slow or block testimony included asserting executive privilege over testimony from two of Pence's top aides, his former chief of staff, Mark Short, and his general counsel, Greg Jacob. But both men returned for grand jury interviews after the Justice Department, in a closed-door court proceeding, fought the effort to apply executive privilege. How do you like that? That's unusual. Usually people are happy to take the shelter of executive privilege. They're actually saying, no, I don't want it. Pence, who rebuffed Trump's efforts to enlist him in the plan to block certification of the Electoral College results, has been publicly critical of Trump's conduct in the run-up to January 6th and the assault on the Capitol, and on the day of the attack when members of a pro-Trump mob were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." He's against that, as it turns out. During an appearance in New Hampshire in August, Pence indicated he was open to appearing before the House January 6th committee, which had been pushing to have him tell his story, but he offered a caveat. If there was an invitation to participate, I'd consider it. But he added that he was concerned that speaking to a congressional committee would violate the doctrine of separation of powers between the executive and legislative branches. No, it's oversight. But as I said, I don't want to prejudge. If ever any formal invitation came, he said, we'd give it due consideration. However, in Interviews for the release of his new book, So Help Me God, So Help Me God? Oh, I think it's So Help Me God. Mr. Pence has been more emphatic in his opposition to providing testimony to the House committee, asserting that Congress has no right to my testimony about what he witnessed. There's profound separation of powers issues. Not really. I mean, there are, but not surrounding the question of testimony. I guess compelling the testimony is a question. But yeah, usually not. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't really think so. It's not I don't know. We could imagine that, I guess if they were compelling the testimony, I mean, but it's at equal parts separation of powers and checks and balances, though, too. I mean, you have to be able to assert the legislative privileges here and get the testimony that you need and conduct the oversight of executive branch operations that you need. And sometimes that's going to mean forcing the executive to actually do things. And I mean, you could complain that that's a separation of powers thing, but it's also a check and balance, if you ask me. Although, again, they could refuse, and then they could say, well, we can impeach you. That's the check that they have, as opposed to compelling testimony. I don't know. There are some issues, but I don't think they're the issues that he's thinking about. He's thinking, I don't have to tell you. You can't ask me. To do so is a violation of the separation of powers. That's not the case. You can't force me to answer, but not you can't ask me. Anyway, Pence, according to people familiar with his thinking, sees the Justice Department inquiry differently, given that it is a criminal investigation. It's interesting that he makes no mention of the fact that, well, see, my criticism of there being a separation of powers issue disappears once I, as a member of the executive branch, am asked questions about my conduct by other members of the executive branch. The separation of powers issue disappears. I don't mention it, so technically that might be an acknowledgement that it disappears. But, I was looking for I would answer the questions because there's no separation of powers issue, which I just said was a huge deal. But instead, he says I might answer their questions because it's a criminal investigation, and his testimony could be compelled by subpoena, though none has been issued. Well, your testimony could be compelled by subpoena from the January 6th committee as well. It's just that you are saying you wouldn't honor a legislative branch subpoena, but you would honor an executive branch subpoena because presumably, if you're really thinking about it deeply, because there's no separation of powers issue, but probably not. Also, I would point out to you that, ironically enough, it was Dick Cheney, in this case, who insisted that the vice president could, at will, switch back and forth between regarding himself as an executive branch official, as vice president of the United States, and a legislative branch official as president of the Senate, and maybe possibly even a different branch altogether, some sort of hybrid that doesn't live in either branch but exists all by itself. So, I guess we'll count our blessings that he's not invoking that. It might be beyond his mental capacity to invoke something like that, but certainly one of his lawyers could remind him that option is available to him to confuse people with. But it tells me something that there's not, it makes me doubt that he's done a great deal of thinking about the separation of powers issue. Somebody gave him that as a talking point. Anyway, the former vice president is being represented by Emmett Flood, who could certainly have told him about this, a veteran Washington-based lawyer who served as the lead Trump White House lawyer dealing with the investigation by Mueller, Robert S. Mueller, by the way, the third, the special counsel into possible conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia in 2016. Flood is representing several other top White House officials who find themselves as witnesses in the range of congressional and Justice Department investigations into Mr. Trump, including Mr. Short, not Martin, Mark. An increasing number of high-ranking officials in Trump's administration have received grand jury subpoenas as part of the Justice Department's inquiry into a wide array of efforts to overturn the election, including a plan to create fake slates of pro-Trump electors in key swing states that were won by Biden. The wide-ranging subpoenas sought information on a host of subjects that included the fake elector plan, attempts to paint the election as having been marred by fraud, and the inner workings of Trump's main post-election fundraising vehicle, the Save America PAC. The effort to seek an interview with Pence puts both the department and the former vice president in uncharted territory. Pence is considering a campaign for president in 2024 in a race that Mr. Trump has already announced his candidacy for, and Mr. Biden's Justice Department is seeking to use Pence as a potential witness against Trump. Either could end up as rivals to Mr. Biden should he run again, which he has indicated is likely. Pence has written in detail in his book about Trump's efforts to stay in power and the pressure campaign he imposed on his vice president beginning in December 2020. Among other interactions, he describes Pence details how Trump summoned him to the Oval Office on January 4th to meet with a conservative lawyer, John Eastman, who repeatedly argued that Pence could exceed the ceremonial duties of overseeing the Electoral College certification by Congress. Eastman was promoting the notion that Pence had the power to set aside the results from states where Trump was still trying to challenge the outcome. Pence writes about telling Trump that he did not have such authority. In an interview with the Times in connection with the book, Pence was forceful, saying that he was blunt with Mr. Trump, that he could not do what he wanted. In the weeks before January 6th, I repeatedly told the president that I did not have the authority to reject or return electoral votes. It was clear he was getting different legal advice from an outside group of lawyers that, frankly, should never have been let in the building. In that period of time, Trump began to publicly pressure Pence as well as officials in Georgia to go along with his efforts to remain in office. At the same time, Trump began using his Twitter account to try to draw a crowd to Washington for a, quote, protest at the Ellipse near the White House on January 6th. You know that story. The Times has previously reported that Pence's chief of staff, Mr. Short, called Mr. Pence's lead Secret Service agent, Tim Giebels, I don't know, Giebels, to his West Wing office on January 5th. When Giebels, or whatever his name is, arrived at Short's office, the chief of staff said that the president was going to turn on the vice president and that they would have a security risk because of it. A conversation that Short described to the House Select Committee. The committee released a video snippet of Short discussing it at one of its public hearings this year. Trump addressed the crowd at the Ellipse on January 6th at midday, again pressured Pence, whom he had called a few hours earlier in a further effort to persuade him to go along with the last-ditch plan to block the certification. In his address at the Ellipse, Trump said, "You're never going to take back your country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong, strongly strong," I think he probably thought. He went on, "So I hope Mike has the courage to do what he has to do. Ram the ramparts, take over the airports, whatever he has to do. And I hope he doesn't listen to the rhinos and the stupid people that he's listening to." A short time later, Trump's supporters marched to the Capitol where Mr. Pence was. Hundreds of them stormed the building, smashing windows and barreling through doors, forcing Mr. Pence, his wife, and his daughter to flee his office in the Capitol and take refuge in a loading dock underground. And he stayed there working to get the situation under control as Trump watched the coverage of the riot on television at the White House. Pence wrote about the experiences in his book. I think we've already established that. And has since described his anger that Trump was, quote, reckless and, quote, endangered Mr. Pence and his family. But we forgive him, I guess, basically, is what he's saying, by not going full bore against him. Despite Pence being a witness to a range of Trump's actions in office, the interview of the former vice president would be the first time he has been questioned in a federal investigation of Mr. Trump. Pence was in the room for many of the key events examined by Mueller in the obstruction investigation, but Pence's lawyer at the time managed to get him out of having to testify. The lawyer, Richard Cullen, met with Mr. Mueller and his team, telling them that Pence believed Trump had not obstructed justice and would say what he would say if questioned. Mueller's team never followed up to question Pence, and he was never cited as a witness against Trump in Mueller's final report. So, there you go, I guess. That's where we stand with that. Important to know heading into what I think will be, well, it's a 3-day absence probably, certainly from live shows over the weekend, and we'll see how things develop afterwards on Monday. All right. Let's check back in with what's happening in Arizona. I had mentioned to you that I thought that there was maybe more than just Cochise County voting to delay their certification, and there is. And according to the Tucson Sentinel, once I get the giant pop-up ad out of the way, we'll figure out what's going on here. Arizona counties, plural, will be forced to certify election despite, quote, political theater. I think that's a nice way of putting a headline on this thing. 2 counties have postponed their counting until the last minute. I mean, which so far isn't much of a drama, right? They need to certify by November 28th, is it? And so they have declared in their, rebelliousness, then that's when we'll certify. But I guess it's still a question. Will they vote to certify? That's where the law lays down the line. And I guess they could simply defy the law and simply say, well, we'll either suffer the consequences or not come November 28th. But just waiting causes problems all by itself. If everybody else is certifying, then the state can go ahead and do their certification without any problems. If they delay, then there's an annoyance, and they may have to go through processes to force them to certify or to certify in their name if they simply refuse to physically to comply with things. 2 counties have postponed until the last minute, but election lawyers say courts will force certification by the deadline no matter what. Jen Fifield is the reporter on this piece. Again, the Tucson Sentinel. Amid a GOP campaign to pressure county supervisors across Arizona not to certify their elections, 2 counties out of 15, right? 2 counties have postponed their vote until the 11th hour, raising questions about what happens if they fail to meet their deadline to finalize results. There's a simple answer, according to election attorneys in the state. If counties do not certify their election by the Monday deadline imposed by state law, courts will force them to do so. I guess the writ of mandamus in the offing there. Remember that? But court proceedings could potentially cause delays, interfering with the tight timeline for 2 statewide recounts, and would force taxpayers to pay legal costs for a case where the outcome essentially isn't in doubt. So that's annoying and bad, right? You don't really need to have a court case about this because the answer is obvious, but they're going to force it. You got to spend money to do the obvious. They will cost the county a lot of money and embarrassment, and it will do nothing, said elections law attorney Jim Barton. The resistance comes from officials in 2 mostly rural and heavily Republican corners of the state, Cochise County in the southeast and Mojave County in the northwest. Greg mentioned both the other day. Those supervisors cited different reasons. So we got to figure out what are the Mojave reasons. Their delay in certifying leaves a trove of predominantly GOP votes uncertified for now. So good, fine. You lost even bigger. Cochise supervisors' decision to put off certification appears to have been at least partly influenced by people who live outside those counties, including some activists involved in a failed movement to throw out the 2020 election results. Those activists have revived claims they made unsuccessfully in 2020. And why not revive unsuccessful claims, right? That vote counting machines weren't properly certified, even though the Arizona Supreme Court rejected that claim in September. On Friday, Cochise County supervisors voted to postpone their vote until November 28th after hours of coordinated public comments that appeared to have been orchestrated by 3 individuals who made similar claims in 2020. Phoenix resident Paul Rice, Maricopa City resident Daniel Wood, and Brian Steiner, who did not tell the board where he lives. Supervisor Peggy Judd said she wanted to do more research on their claims about vote counting machines before finalizing the results, adding that she has a hard time trusting, quote, any computer. I suspect that there are several computers she trusts just fine. Anyway, I don't even trust my cell phone, and it's a flip phone, and I don't trust it. Okay, I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but it doesn't always give me results. It's not always there for me, so it's a difficult thing, she said. And what is in this world of ours? Nothing but that for which you would readily make excuses when it doesn't show up. I'm sure she would say, I trust God. God is always there for me. Maybe, but like, for instance, why doesn't God resolve the counting issue for you? Some things you can rely on, or, find a way to justify relying on God or whatever you think might be God. Other things you can't, but you excuse the absence there, don't you? No worse than any computer, really. On Monday, the Mojave County Board of Supervisors, all Republicans, also voted to delay certifying the election results until November 28th, but in that case, there was no impassioned public comment. Okay. 2 supervisors, in fact, said the delay was simply an effort to make a political statement. Oh, okay. I think that's actually worse. Supervisor Hildy Angius, Angius, a Republican, even promised the county would certify before the deadline. Okay. If we don't certify today, we are just making basically a statement of solidarity, she said, implying that she supported the overall effort not to certify the election. She just doesn't want to certify because she's a Republican who buys into these theories. But I guess eventually she's saying they'll come around. Either she'll eventually change her vote or she'll refuse and the state will step in and use the courts to certify. I don't know whether she intends to change her mind or not. So statement of solidarity. I don't know what that, I mean, it's nonsensical, but okay. GOP leaders such as former Trump advisor Steve Bannon and Turning Point founder Charlie Kirk, what a collection, have been urging county leaders not to certify election results, asserting that Maricopa County's election was riddled with so many problems that the statewide results should not be certified. Maricopa County's not listening to them, so they're looking for suckers in other counties and say, if you cause problems, then maybe the statewide results can't be certified. But lawyers saying, no, they'll be certified. They'll just be certified without you. And then everybody will have an opportunity to vote you out of office later on. If those counties are big believers in following the rule of law, which they might not be. We don't know. Supervisors in both Cochise and Mojave counties have said their elections were well run, but delaying the certification is a way to prove to their rural red constituency that they did everything they could to stop statewide certification, even if it doesn't work, said Republican political consultant Chuck Coughlin, CEO of the consulting firm High Ground. The effort stems from 2020 election denialism, he said, that is hard to eradicate in one cycle. If the counties don't certify on time, the Secretary of State will use all available legal remedies to compel compliance with Arizona law. State Elections Director Corey Lorick, remember her? I think we keep mentioning that and keep saying, do you remember her? Yeah, you do. That's what she said in her statement. 6 counties are now all scheduled to certify results on Monday. That includes Maricopa County, where officials are currently preparing an answer to a demand for information and documents from the Attorney General's office about Election Day problems. Supervisors Chairman Bill Gates, I've forgotten about that, said in a statement Monday that county officials would answer the questions transparently and would certify the election results on time. There will be no delays or games, he wrote. We will canvass in accordance with state law. This next section is called No Choice But to Certify. Seems good. Several election law attorneys told VoteBeat, that's the section of the paper here that's covering these issues, that the supervisors do not have a real choice. State law requires county supervisors to certify or canvass their county's results within 20 days of the election. The only exception in the law is that if there are any missing returns among polling place results, the canvass shall be postponed from day to day until all the returns are received or until 6 postponements have been had. There's a cap on them. The Secretary of State, in turn, is required to certify the statewide election on December 5th. County supervisors have a non-discretionary duty to certify the results and have no authority to change vote totals or to reject the election results, according to the Election Procedures Manual. The certification of results is what's known as a ministerial act, according to Barton and lawyer Tom Ryan. If supervisors vote against certifying, the Secretary of State, a voter, a candidate, or voting rights group will quickly, any one of them, would have standing to file a lawsuit and force them, Barton said, and the court is unlikely to allow it. I mean, it's sort of backwards said. It's unlikely to allow the refusal to certify. They will be hit, here it is, with a writ of mandamus. And in fact, how quickly will it happen? It will happen so fast their head will spin, Ryan said. For her part, Lorick sent a letter to Cochise County supervisors on Monday warning them that bad faith attempts to derail Arizona's democracy will not go unaddressed. That is true. They will be hit with that writ of mandamus. And just to clarify what this is all about, we've been over the writ of mandamus before, but essentially when they say, look, you are required to certify, what if they just say, I just won't do it. I will not sign that line. And if things can't be certified unless we sign that stuff, I refuse to sign it. Well, that's where the writ of mandamus comes in. If you say, look, this is a ministerial function. The only job you have, the only choice you have is to sign on that line by this day. If you don't do it, the state will step in and say you have to. If you still refuse, they'll just sign and certify in your place. It will be done just without you. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see, we got more to read through here. I think this is a good technical explanation, or it gives us the opportunity to supplement it with good technical explanation. Do you understand, though, the writ of mandamus? Essentially, it's the court saying, well, we say you have to do this. You say you don't, and we say, well, it's going to be done, with or without you. You can be, I mean, I don't know about what happens afterwards, like with a writ of mandamus. If they issue a writ of mandamus and you refuse it, I assume you can be held in contempt of court. You say, I'm not going to sign it. And two things can happen. One, they say, it no longer matters whether you sign it or not. We've ordered that it happen. And it's going to happen. So by court order, this election is now certified in this county, period, the end. In addition to which, you are in contempt of court for refusing to comply with the order. So it's pointless for you to throw up your hands. I mean, you know, you'll do your thing and then you'll say, I'm a political prisoner or whatever, but the election will be certified. And then, the people that care about you will moan and wail, and they might be convinced that you're a political prisoner too. But in the meantime, the election will be certified, and that's the upshot of the writ of mandamus. So that's how you take care of something where they say, well, I just refuse to do it. Well, then we don't actually need you anymore. Plus, you go to jail for contempt of court at our option. So I think that's pretty much what happens after defiance of a writ of mandamus. Okay, so where were we? We had just said that was going to happen. Barton and Ryan said they couldn't think of a reason why a court would not demand certification in this case. Barton said voters should see the supervisors' delays as using their vote as a game in this political theater. Ryan pointed out that the supervisors are taking a political risk, considering they represent Republican-heavy constituents who cast ballots for Republican candidates and want to see those votes counted. That is an interesting wrinkle that they seem to be unconcerned about, but that's because their constituents, to the extent that they're conspiracy theorists, are not thinking about this thing logically and just never will. But yeah, by refusing to certify the Cochise County, if you were able to block them from actually being certified, which you're not because the writ of mandamus is available, but I don't know. Let's say you're also a firm believer that no judge would issue a writ of mandamus and no appellate judge would overrule that ruling and no state Supreme Court would refuse to uphold the right of the equivalent of the district judge, the trial judge, to to refuse to issue that writ of mandamus. I guess, you could try and rely on that. And I guess their argument is, well, I just won't be the one. I won't give in. They'll never break me, whatever. And if they certify the election themselves, then it's all invalid because everybody knows that the law says that the election has to be certified by me, the county supervisor here. And if I don't do it and they step in and do it for me, that's not in compliance with the law, except it is in compliance with the law because the court has said our interpretation of the law is that we can step in and do this. But I guess if you're the kind of person for whom it makes sense that, wouldn't you be angry if the bank did this thing and asked Mark Zuckerberg that question? And the whole world is a cancer. And if that's the mindset, then you're not going to get it. That when a court steps in and says, under a writ of mandamus, that this has to be done, and if you simply refuse to affix your signature, we hereby hold that as a matter of law, despite what the statutes say about what you're supposed to do and whose signature is supposed to appear on this certificate, if you refuse, we find as a matter of law that it is perfectly fine that our order stands in the place of your signature. You can argue all day long that, it says my signature and I didn't put it there, so therefore that's it. That's the determinative factor here. And the courts simply say, what you do in a situation like that. If Supervisor A says, no, my signature is all that can certify. There is no other power qualified to certify. Therefore, there's no certification. And other people say, well, opinions differ. We think a court's signature can count in its place. The supervisor simply says, no, show me in the Constitution where it says that a court's order can stand in for my signature. And, it's a problem. You can't point to it in the Constitution, although maybe in the, Arizona State Constitution you can. I don't know. But then you say, well, where do we go to adjudicate such questions about whether the supervisor is right or everybody else who's arguing against the supervisor is right? And the answer is you go to court about it. And guess what? The court says we can do it. And you'll say, well, that's a corrupt bargain. You can't be judge in your own case. And, he's got a point there. But then it's like, well, I don't know. You are the one who wanted to honor the Constitution, right? Constitution says these things are up to the courts. So there you go. Except then they'll argue the United States Constitution doesn't say that. Judicial review is an invention. Granted, it's an invention of the founding era Chief Justice Marshall, but he was totally wrong about that, but totally right about everything else, I guess, because he was a founding father type figure, etc., etc. I don't know. Doesn't make any sense, but that's what they'll argue. That's where it is. And I guess it is a gray area. But I guess so long as most people in the country say, yeah, it's the courts that decide such things, and they have decided, then that's all there is to it. That's the end of it. They'll just say, no, it isn't, and the only authority under the Constitution are county sheriffs or something like that. And if my county sheriff doesn't agree with this, then he's in on the conspiracy and it has to be somebody else instead. There's no shortage of things. Just like with Donald Trump, you can just keep appealing, coming up with different explanations, pleading it 5 different ways, 10 if you have to. But eventually, everybody's going to look at you funny and bypass you. So that's I guess that's the best explanation I can give you for it, is it's just a matter of, hey, if you can convince everybody in society then you're right, then yeah, I guess then you'll win. And we'll all find out that we were wrong the whole time. That's the explanation, right? As it turns out, our understanding of the constitutional order was completely wrong. If you can, in fact, get everybody that you need to agree with you. But it's not looking good. We'll say that. And then back to their point, which is, suppose you succeed in all this. What you've done is taken a very Republican county and told all the people in that county, your votes don't count. That's not a great outcome. So I don't know how happy they're going to be with it, but they might be willing to throw out their votes in order to make a point, which I guess goes back to Mark Baker's question, which is more important, your money or your vote? And I guess in these cases, their money is their more important one, because they're willing to sacrifice their vote to make a great point about how we're all wrong about what voting is and how it works and what democracy is all about. So there you go. Ryan pointed out, right, that supervisors are taking the political risk that they're ultimately taking here is if they prevail, if they say that all their Republican constituents don't count. They are screwing over the statewide Republican candidates, Ryan said. That makes no sense whatsoever. So now on to the next section, coordinated effort in Cochise County to block recertification, or the certification, I guess. There's no anything. Block certification. While some Cochise County residents have told the board they have questions about their election, the resistance supervisors are citing appears to be organized by Rice, Wood, and Steiner. Others who had signed up to speak at the supervisors' meeting instead gave their allotted time to those three. So it is coordinated, you see. Their argument is the same as in 2020, that the testing lab that certified the county's vote counting machines, SLI compliance, was not properly accredited by the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. Now here's the germ of truth, I guess. While it is true that the company's accreditation has not been renewed for years, under federal rules, it remains accredited anyway, as long as it reapplied in a timely manner. Nonetheless, activists continue to assert that the EAC's failure to reissue the accreditation on time means the machines should not be used, even though a court has already rejected their argument. And here we're back in the same space as the writ of mandamus. The election, I don't know why, and it doesn't explain here, why the Election Assistance Commission wouldn't have recertified SLI compliance to do these tests in a timely manner. One explanation, of course, could be that the Election Assistance Commission was under the control of the Trump administration for a long time. And I guess you could ask yourself, now you have to ask yourself, what if people in the Trump administration's EAC were in the habit of just routinely refusing to process the paperwork so that election denialist nuts would have this tiny grain of truth to stand on? And if they did do that, wouldn't the answer be that, well, you'd go to court and say, well, technically, the EAC didn't certify SLI to test Arizona's elections machines. And you would end up in court and you would tell the court that means that SLI can't do the tests. And if they do the tests, that they're invalid. And that means that Arizona's voting machines stand without a valid certification, right, Mr. Judge? Except if Mr. or Ms. or them judge, whatever, however you want to designate it. That sounds awfully odd. But at any rate, if the judge in that case says, you make a good point, but so do the other guys who say, well, the law says that in the absence of a timely recertification, they remain certified. It's a line drawing exercise. You have to either say it's a hard, bright line rule, and if you don't have the certification, everything you do is invalid, or it could be, well, look, there could be any number of reasons why the certification didn't come through, and if it's just a bureaucratic delay, but everything else is substantially the same, we're going to go ahead and say it's the ruling of the court that even without that paperwork being processed at some bureaucrat's office in Washington. And notice how important the bureaucrat's office in Washington suddenly is to the election denialists. Ordinarily, they ignore what goes on in some bureaucrat's office in Washington. But this time it's super important. And they say, certification, all the substantive realities of what go into certification are still present here. It's simply one. What if it's a person who really ought to be getting a writ of mandamus? Somebody at the Election Assistance Commission who's just refusing to do it for no good reason. And it's a matter of how quickly can you get a writ of mandamus forcing them to either sign it or certifying SLI in the absence of the bureaucrat's signature. If you're in the exact same situation, right, the court can simply say, you know what? It doesn't matter as much because the substance of what needs to be certified is all present. And we see that and we therefore, or we simply say, it doesn't matter. The rule is that this happens anyway. They had Congress had an opportunity to write the law differently. They chose not to. And that's all we have to interpret here. They said in the absence of this certification, you go ahead as though certification were automatically renewed. And that's a choice they made, and we're not going to question it. That could absolutely be the outcome. That won't satisfy the conspiracy-minded or the zealous advocates who are dedicated for one reason or another to rejecting the court's rulings, but it's the ruling nonetheless. And you either believe in the rule of law or you don't. So, while it's true that the company's accreditation hadn't been renewed for years under federal rules, it remains accredited anyway. That's the rule. But that rule sucks. Yeah. So you could try to get that rule struck down, I guess, at the Supreme Court, but so far you're having no luck with that. And in the meantime, that's the rule. So there you go. That's the explanation. I mean, it's a little bit unsatisfying, but there it is. Lorick also sent supervisors a letter dated Monday from Mark Robbins, the interim executive director of the USEAC, who confirmed that the version of the vote counting machines that the county used were certified by the commission on May 3rd, 2019. There's the final word. The Cochise supervisors who are now questioning whether to certify, Tom Crosby and Peggy Judd, are the same Republicans who attracted national attention over the past few months, and I guess they're enjoying it, as they unsuccessfully attempted to force through a full hand recount of ballots cast in the midterm election. A court shut down that effort earlier this month, and the Arizona Supreme Court declined to review the case. Undeterred, Crosby and Judd then filed a separate lawsuit against County Elections Director Lisa Mara, asking the court to order her to expand the county's statutorily required post-election hand count audit. They then abruptly withdrew the lawsuit. Well, that's the end of that then. Mara told the supervisors on Friday that the election was fair and accurate with no serious complaints. Audits before and after the election verified that the vote counting machines tallied votes accurately, and about 77,400 voters cast ballots in the election, a turnout of 61.1%. It's unclear when Crosby and Judd began considering delaying certification, but Judd reached out to the Secretary of State's office with questions at 8 p.m. Thursday, the night before the supervisors were set to vote on certification, according to emails provided by the Secretary of State's office. So what most people would say, not a particularly robust effort to make timely inquiries about what they should be doing here. 8 p.m. Thursday, the night before supervisors are supposed to certify. It states on your website that we can request actual certificates for our machines, proving they have currently been certified according to statute and the HAVA, Help America Vote Act, HAVA. Judd wrote in the initial email, please send those that Cochise County uses immediately. I hope to have them by 3 p.m. Friday. I don't know whether that's a reasonable request or not. Lorick replied at 9:48 a.m. on Friday with the state and federal certificates, so I guess it was a reasonable request. Along with correspondence the EAC sent to counties when faced with questions about the accreditation of companies that certify voting machines. Wow, Judd wrote back at 2:18 p.m., less than 2 hours before the supervisor's 4 p.m. meeting. That is a lot. She then asked more questions. Lorick wrote back at 3:26 p.m. with answers, also sending the court order dismissing the 2021 lawsuit from Rice, Wood, and Steiner. At the meeting Friday, Wood told the supervisors that his claims about the vote counting machines meant the election was unlawful. Don't sign off on this, he said. Send it to the legislative branch. Let them deal with this so they can call a special election and we can do it without these awful or unlawful machines, and we can do it with hand counts, which has been done for over 200 years. Not really. Lorick also spoke, telling the supervisors the machines were properly certified through an accredited company and under state and federal law. But Judd still said that it was, quote, alarming that there was something going on. Doesn't say what it is, but or why it's alarming. She asked questions, they were answered, and she says, but there's still something alarming here. We need to make sure we have drilled down to the lowest level on this, Judd said. What do you want to know? She and Crosby voted to table accepting the election results until we have such evidence about the lawful certification and accreditation by a laboratory and is presented and confirmed by persons with expertise in this field. It's unclear whose expertise Crosby and Judd would accept, but Crosby suggested Lorick wasn't it, while the state's elections director said SLI Compliance, the company, was properly accredited. Crosby acknowledged, other people say they're not. So there you have it. Though we have a certification that says that they're accredited, other people say that's fake. So we're going to have something about this. What? I don't know. Is she of higher and greater importance than our citizens? Oh, I'm sorry. Is this, oh yeah, right. So Crosby suggested Lorick isn't the right person. Right. Well, wait a minute. Who's Crosby? Oh, that's the other supervisor, right? While the state's elections director said SLI compliance was properly accredited, Crosby acknowledged that other people say they're not. Is she of higher and greater importance than our citizens? I think not. Who is he speaking about here? Lorick. Like, she's the keeper of the certificates. Show me the certificates. All right, here they are. Show me why these certificates are the right certificates. Okay, here you go. Show me why these three people's claims aren't valid. Okay, here's the court order dismissing their lawsuit. Well, what are you, like Miss Super Important person, even more important than our citizens? I think not. Well, I mean, you do think not. I mean, you don't think so and you don't think. So I don't know what to do with you here. The only answer is mandamus, so we'll do it. Well, she is the elections director for the state of Arizona, Supervisor Ann English, the only Democrat on the 3-member board, pointed out. But apparently that's not good enough for them. And let's see, next section. This has nothing to do with Mojave County. That's a quote. Let's see what it's all about. In Mojave County, Anguisse, I don't know. We introduced that person earlier, but Anguisse praised the county's elections director, Alan Tempert, for a well-run election, saying she wishes that he could give Maricopa County officials some lessons on how it was done. So even when they acknowledge, okay, fine, the election was done perfectly here in Mojave County, that just goes to prove how bad it is in Maricopa. Whatever. Tempert told the board, and I wonder if Tempert would say, no, they were fine in Maricopa. But anyway, Tempert told the board there is no such thing as a perfect election, but this one was very, very successful. About 82,800 voters cast ballots in the election, a turnout of 56.3%. And Guise said that if they didn't vote to certify, this has nothing to do with Mojave County because you did an awesome job. So that's their supervisor saying, we're just going to refuse to certify, not because you did anything wrong, but because we think things were bad in Mojave County. Or not Mojave, but Maricopa County. And maybe Cochise, I'm not certain. County GOP chairwoman, Jean Kench, who is, and that's a K at the beginning of her surname, just pointing that out, who is also the county assessor. She's Republican chairwoman and county assessor, that happens, told the board to certify the election. Go ahead and do it. So we don't risk the statutory recount that could help our Republican Attorney General candidate, Abe Hamida. Hamida lost the election to Democratic candidate Chris Mays by 510 votes, and the race, along with the state superintendent of public instructions race, will trigger an automatic recount under state law once the results are certified. So that's an interesting tack, too. At the same time, Kench said she believes Mojave County voters have been disenfranchised. Votes have been diluted due to the mismanagement and dysfunction of Maricopa County. Supervisor Buster Johnson, she doesn't explain how, asked his colleagues if they were just making a political statement and ultimately were going to do what the agenda said by certifying the election. It is purely a political statement, Supervisors Chairman Ron Gould answered him, but it is the only way we can make this statement. Supervisor Gene Bishop called this ludicrous. We aren't Maricopa County, we are Mojave County, she said. Our vote is solid. Our canvass is going to be solid. Whether it's Monday or today, we are good. Republican-heavy counties Graham, La Paz, Pinal, I think that's actually Pinal, but I don't know. They don't put the tilde in this version. And Yuma certified their results on Monday. And while a rumor spread on social media sites on Monday suggesting Gila County would delay certifying their results, the county had already done so in a unanimous vote last Friday. So, okay, that didn't really happen either. People need to feel confident in the election process, Supervisors Chairman Tim Humphrey said, and I think they can in Gila County. Coughlin, the political consultant, said he believes the other counties will move forward with certification after this political theater. He believes this political posturing is political posturing for the Republican supervisors who want to remain the preferred candidate of the far right so they don't face primary challenges during the next election. This is a dance to appease those constituencies, to prevent people from getting to the right of them in the next election and to protect them in a primary, Coughlin said. And that is the conclusion of this exciting piece. I liked it. I loved it. Tucson Sentinel diving all the way into the detail and giving us the opportunity to provide even more. So I really appreciate it. Jen Fifield, I think, well reported there, and no mistakes that I could see about confusion about the different things that can sometimes inject some uncertainty where none belongs. All right, we have a few minutes here. We should just cut out early now and just be like, all right, screw it. Peace out. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Justice could handle it. He's in position to do that. All right, let's see. Anything else that we want to squeeze in before oh, yes, right. There was something that I thought, I'm not going to be able to get the whole thing in here, but I thought you might be somewhat interested in it, even though it comes from the New York Times. It's an opinion guest essay by one Yoel Roth. Mr. Roth is the former head of trust and safety at Twitter. And of course, since he worked to instill trust and safety in the system, he was, I guess, probably fired by Elon Musk. Anyway, something to read during the day today if you're just sitting around waiting for the turkey to cook or whatever. I was the head of trust and safety at Twitter. We found that out, of course, by reading who wrote the piece. This is what could become of it. I guess an insider's account of what's falling apart there at Twitter and how dangerous it could possibly be. To give you some sense of what Roth has to say, this month I chose to leave my position, not fired, but chose to leave my position leading trust and safety at Elon Musk's Twitter. My teams were responsible for drafting Twitter's rules and figuring out how to apply them consistently. It's a tough job. I don't know if they ever got that right. To hundreds of millions of tweets per day. In my more than 7 years at the company, we exposed government-backed troll farms meddling in elections, introduced tools for contextualizing dangerous misinformation, and yes, banned President Donald Trump from the service. The Cornell professor Tarleton Gillespie called teams like mine the custodians of the internet. The work of online sanitation is unrelenting and contentious. Enter Mr. Musk. So you can already hear the dramatic music swelling in the background. In a news release announcing his agreement to acquire the company, Mr. Musk laid out a simple thesis. Free speech is the bedrock of a functioning democracy, and Twitter is the digital town square where matters vital to the future of humanity are debated. He said he planned to revitalize Twitter by eliminating spam and drastically altering its policies to remove only illegal speech. Since the deal closed on October 27th, many of the changes made by Mr. Musk and his team have been sudden and alarming for employees and users alike, including rapid-fire layoffs and an ill-fated foray into reinventing Twitter's verification system. The wave of employee resignations caused the hashtag RIP Twitter to trend on the site on Thursday, not for the first time, alongside questions about whether a skeleton crew of remaining staff members can keep the service, now 16 years old, afloat. And yet, when it comes to content moderation, much has stayed the same since Mr. Musk's acquisition. Twitter's rules continue to ban a wide range of lawful but awful speech. I like that phrase. Mr. Musk has insisted publicly that the company's practices and policies are unchanged. Are we just in the early days, or has the self-declared free speech absolutist had a change of heart? Hard to tell, although the date of this article probably now important, November 18th, now quite dated, I guess, in the online world. Anyway, so that's what's going on here. The truth is that even Elon Musk's brand of radical transformation has unavoidable limits. This sounds like it might be quite interesting. But again, this will likely fall to you to read over the Thanksgiving holiday if you wish. I'll give you one more paragraph before cutting out. Advertisers have played the most direct role thus far in moderating Mr. Musk's free speech ambitions. As long as 90% of the company's revenue comes from ads, as was the case when Musk bought the company, Twitter has little choice but to operate in a way that won't imperil the revenue streams that keep the lights on. This has already proved to be challenging. Almost immediately upon the acquisition's close, a wave of racist and anti-Semitic trolling emerged on Twitter. Wary marketers, including those at General Mills, Audi, and Pfizer, for example, slowed down or paused ad spending on the platform, kicking off a crisis within the company to protect precious ad revenue. So, I encourage you to read on, pick this up. I'll give you the link to do so. I'll have to do that myself today as we wish Scott Anderson a happy Thanksgiving and a day off today. So, it might take me a little while longer to do it, but I'll get it to you. Thanks for joining me today. Thanks to Justice for putting up with the mercurial question of whether or not I would be cutting out early or being on at all, indeed. Stay tuned, if you would, please, for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next right here on Netroots Radio. What's he got for you? Trump braces for his tax returns going to Congress just as Pence is mulling his interview with the Department of Justice. On the rest of his menu today, and what a good day for a menu, most of the Fed officials at their last meeting backed slower rate hikes.
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
I don't know what to make of that. Maybe he can tell you a little bit something about it. A South Carolina program aims to boost the ranks of black teachers, and New York's first pot crop is jeopardized by a court fight. Internationally, the Brazil election agency rejected Bolsonaro's push to void votes. Did you know he was pushing for that? Stay tuned for that and more next.